How could it be difficult to give birth? Didn't the doctor say that there is no problem during the obstetric examination? How can this be done? Construction. Doctor, can you guarantee both? The maternity situation is very dangerous, your family members quickly make up your mind, or you can't keep both of them. Chu Jiao was awakened by these noisy voices. She was wet and seemed to be floating in the ocean. She felt heavy and kept falling, but she felt light, like a feather, and kept going up. With the wind. The doctor's cold and ruthless voice, as well as the voices of her mother-in-law and husband, Chu Jiao could hear clearly. She opened her mouth and wanted to tell the doctor that she wanted to live. But he opened his mouth for a long time, but couldn't make a sound. She heard her mother-in-law's urging voice again, Jian Jian, Chu Jiao is so old, and he is bleeding profusely. She will definitely not be able to conceive in the future, or keep her young. Chu Jiao opened her mouth again, there was more blood under her body, but she still couldn't make a sound. She heard her husband Gu Jianxi's voice again, and she regained her spirits. Jianxi would definitely save her. There are also 2 children she raised hard. Although they are not her own, they are raised by her with hard work, and she will definitely not watch her die. And for the sake of these 2 children, she never gave birth to her own child. She didn't get pregnant until she was 42 years old. If she wasn't too old, she wouldn't have had a difficult childbirth. Dad, Aunt Chu likes children so much, she definitely doesn't want her sister to have an accident. The boss's voice. Big brother is right, Aunt Chu wants her own child so much, we can't let Aunt Chu feel cold. The second child's little beast's voice. Chu Jiao's dark grey eyes suddenly lit up, her body was straight up and down, her eyes were wide open, her face was pale, and her mouth was wide open, as pitiful as a dying fish. She felt the sympathetic eyes of the nurse beside her. Chu Jiao could guess what the nurse was thinking, it must be poor woman, she worked so hard to raise children for others, but ended up raising 2 witty-eyed wolves. Yes, she has raised 2 witty-eyed wolves that are inferior to beasts. She should have figured it out long ago. Those 2 beasts didn't even say mom, they called her Aunt Chu all the time, how could they be sincere to her? It was only when she was about to die that she saw the reality clearly. Hey! She's so stupid. It's not wrong to die. Chu Jiao doesn't have any hope for her husband who has been silent for a long time. She hasn't made a statement yet, doesn't she just want to drag her to death? But she is still not reconciled. She has been following her father at home and her husband when she is married. What did she do wrong? Gu, construction. Chu Jiao tried her best and called out her last cry. The expressions of the Gu family outside changed drastically. Gu Jianxi gritted his teeth and said loudly, Jiao Jiao, I will take good care of our daughter, so don't worry. It was dark in front of her eyes, Chu Jiao fell into the darkness, and there were all kinds of chaotic voices in her ears, but she heard a fiery voice, nonsense, what's so tangled in this kind of thing, save your life. Uncle, this is my family's business. Gu Jianxi, are you still human? It's your wife inside, she's giving birth to a child for you, you're not as good as a beast, and you've lost the face of the Gu family. Bring it to me to sign, won't you take it? I'll kick you to death. Doctor, Master Bao, it's signed. The man's temper was very fierce, and his voice was like gunpowder, but it made Chu Jiao's heart very warm. She twitched the corner of her mouth and wanted to say thank you, but she didn't have the strength. That's too late. She is going to die. But she was not reconciled. If life could start all over again, she would definitely won't have another child. Whoever loves will be born. Chu Jiao stared blankly at the furniture in the room until she saw the white enamel urn on the chest of drawers, with red words on it looking number 6 hospital. She just regained her senses, and somewhat understood the current situation. Not surprisingly, her life really started anew. But how many years is it now? I hope she hasn't married Gu Jianxi's heartless beast. Chu Jiao got up suddenly and walked to the calendar. She remembered that her father, Chu Yuanzi, had obsessive-compulsive disorder. July 10, 1986. Chu Jiao felt relieved. She had just turned 21, and she had not yet married that Gu Jianxi, but her family was already arranging for her to communicate with Gu Jianxi. In her previous life, she followed the arrangements of her father and stepmother, and listened to the words of her husband and in-laws. If she was not allowed to have children, she would not have children, and if she was not allowed to go out to work, she would honestly be a housewife. Gu Jianxi didn't like her dressing up, so she kept her face up all day, dressed in grey, and became a real yellow-faced woman within a few years. The mother-in-law is more dull than the wood, she can't help at all, she only knows to ask for money. My mother-in-law also often said that she couldn't get a fart with 3 sticks, and she also said that if she hadn't married her son, she wouldn't have been able to live a rich life like a rich wife. Ah! Chu Jiao sneered, walked to the closet, drew up her bangs, and in the dressing mirror was a young girl with bulging front and back, with eyebrows like distant mountains, eyes like autumn water, a jade nose and a jade mouth, a beautiful face with goose eggs, and blue silk like ink. Skin is better than snow. You reading www.youcanshu.com. The big place is big, the small is small. She has a height of 165, which is not short in the south, but her feet are only 35 yards, and her waist is 1 foot 7, but she wears a 340 cup, and the peach hips that are particularly popular in later generations. Also know that she is actually beautiful. But that Gu Jianxi deliberately belittled her, saying that she had a vulgar appearance and was not attractive, and he was the only one who didn't dislike her. After talking too much, she really thought she was disgusting, and she became more and more inferior. I don't dare to go out to meet people anymore, and I am at home to raise a child for him, work hard as a yellow-faced mother-in-law, and I am grateful to that bastard. I feel that Gu Jianxi doesn't dislike her, and he has a good heart. Special. She is really stupid, she deserves to die in her previous life. Chu Jiao sneered at herself in the mirror. Although she has a good figure and looks, the clothes she wears have lowered her score. The loose moon-white shirt is old-fashioned, long and fat, and the black trousers are also fat. She was also wearing a pair of black sandals, which perfectly covered her good figure, and the thick bangs also covered half of her face. Her good looks and figure were all ruined by this old-fashioned dress. This is all due to her good stepmother. She also blamed herself for being stupid. The stepmother, He Jihong, is especially good at superficial work and never speaks harshly about her. People before and after are good people, and all the bad people let her father Chu Yuanzi do it. In the previous life, Chu Jiao hated her father very much, and felt that her father was not as good as her stepmother, but now she understands that although her father is not a thing, he still has a little conscience towards her, but his ears are too soft and his courage is too small to protect her at all. The sound of inserting the keyhole came from the door. Chu Jiao dodged into her room, closed the door and hid behind the door, and the voices of her stepmother and stepsister Su Bilian came from outside the door. Mom, why do you want Chu Jiao to marry brother Jianxi? You know me well. Su Bilian was dissatisfied and her voice was not small, but He Jihong interrupted, you are now Gu Yi's wife, and you are thinking about Gu Jianxi. Put it away for me. Who told you to disagree with me and brother Jianxi? I don't want to marry the bandit Gu yet at all. Su Bilian was extremely wronged. If her mother hadn't abruptly separated her and Gu Jianxi, she is now brother Jianxi's wife. Now, how can you use the torment of the bandit guarding Gu yet? He Jihong sneered, if I agree, you can get married? Gu Jianxi had a wife and children at that time, so you would marry him and be the second wife? Humph, you are willing to give such a face, I can't afford to disgrace this person. Brother Jianxi promised me that I would get a divorce. Su Bilian whispered something, and then said dissatisfiedly, and even if she doesn't get divorced, the woman will die. She doesn't have the fortune to be with brother Jianxi. She had just married Gu Ye on the front foot, and the woman on the back foot died in childbirth. Anyway, please remember that you are Gu Yi's wife now, don't think about those who have or not. If you dare to mess around, your grandfather won't spare you. He Zhihong warned. The acquaintance Moruomu, she saw through her daughter's little thought at a glance. Su Billion's face changed slightly, her eyes were dodging, He Zhihong's heart skipped a beat, and she asked sharply, have you met Gu Jianxi? Tell me the truth. After a long period of silence, Su Billion said hesitantly, I've only seen it once or twice, but I didn't do anything. I won't see you again in the future. If you dare to do something humiliating, your grandfather will definitely break your foot. He Zhihong frightened her daughter. If she didn't say it more seriously, this stupid daughter would definitely mess up. That kid Gu Jianxi is the most eloquent, coaxing her silly daughter to the point of death. Back then, she despised Gu Jianxi, and she still despises him now. This boy just opened his mouth and had a very bad conscience. The ex-wife had a difficult childbirth. The conscientious person was only young, but the ex-wife was killed. How could she trust her daughter to marry such a man? Although Gu Ye has a temper, he has the responsibility and ability. His daughter will not suffer after marrying. He Zhihong was heartbroken for her daughter, but Su Billion didn't appreciate it at all, and even felt resentment in her heart, but she didn't dare to show it for fear of being scolded by her grandfather. Mr. He said that he is the one of the He family. The younger generation of the He family are afraid of the old man. Chu Jiao in the room sneered secretly, Su Billion is like her name, she has a really beautiful face, she hooked up with Gu Jianxi in her previous life, this woman was born to He Zhihong and her ex-husband, she is 3 years older than her, and she is now Gu Yi's wife. But soon Su Billion will have an accidental miscarriage and then divorce Gu Ye. Since then, Gu Ye has never remarried. Until her death, the man was still single and raised 2 sons by himself. In fact, they were the children of comrades in arms. After the comrades died, Gu Ye adopted these 2 children. Thinking of the fiery voice before her death, Chu Jiao's heart warmed. Everyone wanted her to die, but Gu Ye, an outsider, stood up for her. In fact, she didn't have many dealings with Gu Ye in her previous life. Because Gu Ye is the uncle of Gu Jianxi, but the relationship is very bad, the water and fire are incompatible, and they do it when they meet. They have never reconciled. In the previous life, Gu Jianxi became a big boss by chance. And especially likes to dig the corner of Gu Jianxi, and every time he digs successfully, Gu Jianxi gnashes his teeth when he mentions this uncle, like an enemy of life and death. In her previous life, she also listened to Gu Jianxi's words, so naturally she did not dare to speak to Gu Ye. In total, she only said 2 times, no more than 10 sentences. However, noodles are still common. Old man Gu is very traditional. It is stipulated that the younger generation in the family must meet at least 3 times a year. New Year's Eve, Mid-Autumn Festival, and Qingming Festival. No matter where they are, they must rush home for reunion, especially Qingming. Take the whole family to the martyrs' cemetery to worship, and give the children and grandchildren an ideological and political lesson that recalls the sweetness of bitterness and sweetness. In Chu Jiao's impression of Gu Ye, he always had a straight face and didn't laugh harshly, but his appearance was the best among the descendants of the Gu family. He was tall, valiant, and martial, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. He was much more handsome than Gu Jianxi's little white face. It's just that Gu Yi's relationship with his father, Grandpa Gu, is very bad, and even his relationship with his own mother is indifferent. Instead, Gu Jianxi has a deeper relationship with his grandmother. Although Gu Ye is the uncle of Gu Jianxi, he is 1 year younger than Gu Jianxi. His mother, Lin Yulan, is the second wife of the old man, and only gave birth to Gu Yi's son. Chu Jia remembered a lot of things in her previous life, but she didn't really like Lin Yulan. This Lin Yulan was really the kindest stepmother in history. It's no wonder that Guye and his mother are so indifferent. It is estimated that they were hurt too hard and their hearts are cold. Billion, Mom won't hurt you, Guye is much better than Guji and she, you and him have a down-to-earth relationship, Guye will definitely have something to do in the future, don't treat those two children harshly. Child, when you have a child, Guye's heart is on you. He Chihong persuaded her hard-heartedly, and she was worried about her daughter. As long as she listened to her words, her daughter's life in the future would definitely not be bad. Mom, you don't know anything, give birth to a fart child. Guye. Su Billion said angrily for a while, but she couldn't say anything later. She lowered her head in shame and twisted her fingers hard. She was very annoyed. What's so good about the husband her mother arranged? Still Gu Jian is good, how strong is it? What happened to Guye? He Chihong asked directly, Yu reading www.yuganchu. Chu Chiao in the comm room also pricked up his ears, guessing silently in his heart, can't it? But in her previous life, Su Billion was pregnant. After counting the time, there should be something in her stomach now. Tell me, what's wrong with Guye? You want to kill me? He Chihong urged. He can't, are you satisfied now? Su Billion was in a hurry and answered loudly, embarrassed, annoyed, and aggrieved. She couldn't help complaining, you keep saying that Guye is good or bad, but this man is completely useless, the bed is like wood, I put down my face and take the initiative. If you touch him, he ignores me and doesn't sleep in the same bed with me, so I'm just like a widow, how do you want me to live these days? Have you never been married once for half a year? He Chihong's complexion changed drastically, and without being ashamed, he asked her daughter directly. He Chihong's heart froze when she heard her daughter's answer. Her carefully selected son-in-law was good in everything, but made a mistake in the most important link. Her daughter is only 24 years old, and it is absolutely impossible to be a widow. Really not? Can you be sure? Have you? He Chihong still didn't want to believe it. Gu Yuran was tall and strong, and he didn't look like someone who couldn't do it. She lowered her voice and asked some private words. Mom, don't ask, it really doesn't work. I've tried everything you said. He was indifferent when I stood naked in front of him. I'm not ugly. As a man, can he not respond? Su Billion was in a hurry and shouted angrily. In fact, as long as Guye was a little bit aggressive in that matter, it wasn't that she couldn't get along with this man. After all, Guye was really good looking, but who let this man fall in love with him? It's useless, she doesn't want to be a widow. Not only He Chihong was dumbfounded by these remarks, but even Chu Chiao in the room couldn't believe it. Guye couldn't do it. How can that be possible? A big man of about 1.8 meters, so strong, looks so energetic, more masculine than Gu Jianxi, how could it not be? He Chihong didn't quite believe it either, but her daughter had sworn it, so she couldn't help but not believe it. Why, how can this happen, why can't it work? Look how energetic! He Chihong muttered to herself, sitting in despair, like an eggplant beaten by frost, her carefully selected son-in-law, the software is all good, but there is a problem with the hardware, alas. Looking at the strength, it's just a silver gun candle wax head, Mom, Guye and I can't get along anyway, those two wild species have no education at all, let's eat and talk, chopsticks can't be used well, talk an earthy smell, it's shameful to take it out, and I'm going to get angry when I see these two wild species. Su Billion became more and more angry. She was only 24 years old, and she had no children of her own. Once she got married, she would be the stepmother of 2 children. If the children were clean, beautiful, and sensible, that's all. It looks like she came out, ugly and stupid, and she will definitely be useless in the future. Why should she bother to raise other people's children? She, Su Billion, doesn't want to lose money. Don't open your mouth and keep your mouth shut. Your father is a fighting hero and a martyr. You can talk about this at home. Don't talk to me when you go out. It's not like this for all the children in the countryside. You and the two children usually care about what are you doing? It's okay to raise them until they are 18 years old. The older one is 8 years old, right? It's only 10 years of hard work, and it's very fast. It's good to have two cheap sons. He Jihong tried hard to persuade her that she was sincere for her daughter's well-being. Those two children were nothing at all. If it was really Gu Yi's own, she would not let her daughter marry her. The older one is 8 years old, and the younger one is 5 years old. The most difficult stage has passed, and they are the descendants of heroes. They have a policy of taking care of them. The daughter raised these brothers, not only the reputation is good, but also a lot of benefits. What is this silly girl? Don't you understand her pain? Mom, that's 10 years? I've been wasted for 10 years. I haven't had any children myself, so why should I raise them for others? Humph, how filial can those who are not my own be so filial? I don't expect those two wild species to be so big. It doesn't matter to me if I have any prospects, I'm going to get a divorce anyway. Su Billion shouted loudly, feeling that her mother didn't understand her at all. She was so wronged and let her live with that dead eunuch. Isn't this pushing her into a fire pit? I've never seen you cheating on your daughter like this. I'm not your own, am I? Su Billion's voice was choked, she was extremely aggrieved, and He Jihong felt distressed immediately, and quickly comforted, you unconscionable, I don't hurt you, can I still hurt Chu Jiao? What kind of life did you live? What kind of life did Chu Jiao live? Do you have eyes can see? Then why don't you let Chu Jiao marry Gu Ye, and let her marry brother Jianxi, knowing that I like Gu Jianxi? Su Billion snorted. When she thought that Chu Jiao was about to marry her sweetheart, her heart was burning. Gu Jianxi belonged to her, so how did Chu Jiao match her? He Jihong frowned, and her heart was filled with panic. She couldn't tell this silly girl clearly, Gu Jianxi was not a good match at all, and Chu Jiao must have had a bad time when she married, but this silly girl wanted to dance. Fire pit, her off. Divorce is impossible. One day she will have a good chat with Gu Ye, and she will treat her when she is ill. Now that medicine is developed, men's problems can be cured. She still doesn't believe that Gu Ye will have problems with her body. Maybe it's just a small problem. Go to the hospital to grab some medicine and eat. I went to see Chu Jiao, there was no movement for a long time, wouldn't it be serious? He Jihong didn't want to talk to the silly daughter, changed the subject, got up to see her stepdaughter, had a heat stroke yesterday, and fainted below the family building. But she had a fever again last night, and she still had a fever when she went to work this morning. As a kind and generous stepmother, she naturally had to take care of her. The has a big life, and he definitely won't die. Su Billion snorted coldly and mocked. You still have the face to say? Yesterday, you made Chu Jia run back and forth 5 or 6 times. At the hottest noon, you didn't let anyone take a breath, just for a piece of clothing. Fortunately, nothing happened, otherwise your mother and my face would be smashed. You've been lost. He Jihong got angry when she said it, and her tone became heavier. Although she didn't like Chu Jiao's stepdaughter, she still took care of her face. Outsiders could never pick out a single fault. There is a way to treat this stepdaughter. Trick. But the stupid daughter didn't deal with Chu Jiao since she was a child. She could see clearly that the 10 times she quarreled was her daughter's unreasonable troubles. Go, she always opens one eye and closes the other, and of course she has to protect her daughter. Stepdaughter, just don't starve to death. Moreover, Chu Jiao is very beautiful. She has deliberately concealed her beauty these years, but she just doesn't want her daughter to be robbed of the limelight. Now that Chu Jiao is 21 years old and her daughter is married, she can release some of her beauty when appropriate, so as to let Gu Gu under construction. Gu Jianxi is the proudest grandson of the old man Gu. The Gu family and the He family are of the same family. Their daughter is married to Gu Yat, and Chu Jiao is married to their nephew Gu Jianxi. In this way, the Gu He family can be tied to death, and Chu Jiao is married. Jiao will always be a generation shorter than her daughter. He Jihong was very proud. Her arrangement was the most perfect. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com had a decent face, and the inside also benefited, and outsiders couldn't pick out any thorns. Who made her so stupid? Don't know if the weather is cooler and send it sooner. Su Billion's mouth was still hard, and she was still a little scared. After all, heat stroke can really kill people, and Chu Jiao almost died yesterday. She was not worried about Chu Jiao's death, but worried that the death of this bumpkin would damage her reputation. Which time did you say that Chu Jiao listened to it as if it were an imperial decree? He Jihong said angrily, but she was still proud, because the stepdaughter was raised like a dog by her, so that Chu Jiao did not dare to go west, and stayed at home obediently as a cow and a horse, which was cheaper than hiring a nanny. Too much. Chu Jiao in the house quickly went back to the bed. She lived in the smallest room in the house. It was originally a storage room and was arranged by He Jihong as her bedroom. The small space was stuffy and hot, with only a very small window and a fan. No, there are only 2 fans in the house, one for He Jihong and his wife, and one for He Jihong's son Chu Peng. Chu Peng is her half-brother. She is 17 years old this year. She is a sophomore in high school. She usually has a normal relationship. He Jihong treasures this son very much and does not let her have too much contact with him. When the door opened, He Jihong was sultry as soon as she came in, and she couldn't help frowning. She walked to the bed and saw Chu Jiao's eyes closed, her face pale and her brows furrowed even tighter. She didn't want to cook lunch on a hot day. Jiao, is it any better? He Jihong softened her voice and reached out to touch her forehead. Thanks to this cramped little house, Chu Jiao felt warm all over her body, so she didn't need to act deliberately. It's still uncomfortable. I don't have the strength. Chu Jiao opened her eyes, spoke feebly, and coughed a few times. She was bullied to death because she was too honest and obedient in her previous life. Then you rest first. He Jihong didn't doubt it. He touched his forehead just now, it was very hot, and Chu Jiao has always been honest. If he wasn't really sick, he would have gotten up. She didn't say a word about Su Billion's behavior yesterday, and after comforting Chu Jiao a few words, she went out. Billion, come cook with me, your Uncle Chu and Xiao Peng are coming back soon. No matter how reluctant He Jihong was, she had to go to the kitchen to cook. She lived in the best suite in the family building, with 2 bedrooms and 1 living room, as well as a kitchen and bathroom. It was about 70 square meters. The couple's face is definitely not divided. The 2 couples both work in the hospital. Chu Yuanzi is a cold-hearted Chinese medicine department, with mediocre medical skills. He can't see a few outpatient clinics in a day. He Jihong has a ultrasound. She doesn't have the ability to grab other positions in the hospital. Why didn't Chu Jiao do it? Did she pretend to be dead again? Su Billion was not happy. On such a hot day, she was blowing the fan hot, so she didn't want to go to the hot kitchen. If you don't do it, go back to your own house, don't stab in front of me. He Jihong was also on fire, and her face slammed. Su Billion left in a rage. She went to the snack bar to eat a bowl of noodles, and she didn't want to cook when she went back. Chu Yuanzi came back from get off work, and soon after that, Chu Peng also came home. The father and son were very similar, both of them were gentle and refined. Chu Yuanzi's appearance was very good, a typical white-faced scholar, otherwise when he was sent to the educated youth, her mother would Sun Yingxiu won't be married. At that time, her grandfather was the captain of the production team, in charge of the life and death of all the educated youths in the production team. Chu Yuanzi was hit. The beautiful woman is still a leader, and of course Chu Yuanzi is very happy, but after getting married, the contradictions intensify. Sun Yingxiamei is beautiful, but she has a bad temper and is not very prudent in her private life. He disliked Chu Yuanzi and had a lover outside. Chu Yuanzi was also able to endure it. She had a green hat on her head for several years until she met He Zhihong, who had just divorced. Although He Zhihong was ordinary in appearance, she had a good family background and a background. He Zhihong also fell in love with Chu Yuanzi's beauty. One of them was willing to attack and the other was willing to defend, and the fight quickly became hot. Of course He Zhihong didn't want to be the third child, and Chu Yuanzi didn't want to stay in the countryside and suffer anymore. Grandpa Chu Jiao was a child. The captain of the team could not compete with the He family, so he had to agree to divorce. Chu Jiao was left to her mother, but Sun Yingxiu was not good to her, and she was often beaten and scolded, because Chu Jiao's appearance focused on the advantages of her parents, and her eyebrows and eyes were very similar to Chu Yuanzi's. I smashed whatever I grabbed. The most serious one, I grabbed the ashtray and smashed it on Chu Jiao's forehead. The blood was broken from the head, and he was not sent to the hospital. Fortunately, Chu Jiao survived, but there was a small hole on his forehead, which he usually covered with bangs. 10 years ago, Sun Yingxiu met a southern man who was doing business. It was like glue. He went to the south with the southern man within half a year, and never came back. 5 years ago, Chu Jiao's grandfather and grandmother died. After meeting Chu Yuanzi, Chu Jiao came to Lukang to live with Chu Yuanzi's family. After working as a horse in this house for 5 years, she is worse than a nanny. The nanny still has a salary. She doesn't have a penny, and she lost her life and most of her life in her previous life. Chu Jiao smiled self-deprecatingly, her body was sticky and hot, she had a fever last night, she was sweating, and she didn't have a fan. She didn't know how she had survived all these years. In her previous life, she followed Gu Jianxi to be a rich wife for more than 10 years. Materially, Gu Jianxi did not treat her too badly. The family was warm in winter and cool in summer all year round, and she had good food, drink, and clothes. Now Chu Jia really suffers. Not such a stuffy house. She looked at the small room, there was only one bed, not even a wardrobe, and she had few pieces of clothes, which were folded and placed on the bed. She was a little stronger than a beggar in her current state. The most urgent task is to change the housing conditions, and then solve the Gu Jianxi. Even if she is a bachelor for the rest of her life, she will never marry that again. Qiao Qiao, are you feeling better? Chu Yuanzi entered the room with a concerned expression and a little guilt, because he couldn't stand up for his daughter. He Zhihong had the final say in this family, and Su Billion had no respect for his stepfather, and if he liked to ignore him, how could he dare to teach him a lesson? Sorry. Dad, I'm so hot. Chu Jiao coughed weakly a few times. She looked like she was dying. She had to get an electric fan first. In this coffin-like room, she couldn't live for a day without an electric fan. Chu Yuanzi also felt the heat, but he was sweating profusely while standing still. His daughter was seriously ill and stayed in such a stuffy room. His biological father didn't do his best. Dad will get you a fan. Chu Yuanzi had a rare conscience to find out, so he ran to his own room to get a fan and put it in front of Chu Jiao. The fan was a little old, and the plates squeaked, but it didn't affect the wind speed. Thank you, Dad. Will Aunt He be unhappy? Chu Jiao looked at her biological father timidly. Her bangs had been pinched up by her, revealing a beautiful face. Her appearance was similar to that of her biological mother, Sun Yingxiu. But in fact, what she most resembles is her grandmother, Chu Yuanzi's mother. Chu Yuanzi was stunned. He hadn't seen his daughter's face clearly for a long time. When he suddenly saw his mother, he felt an unspeakable feeling in his heart, and the father's love that had disappeared for a long time was rarely returned. In fact, when Chu Jiao was born, he was very happy and wanted to nurture his daughter well, so he gave her the name Chu Jiao, hoping that her daughter would be the best. But this daughter disappointed him very much. She was cowardly and timid, so she only picked up a little skin, but it was always his own daughter, and he still hoped that her daughter would be well. No, your aunt he has a good temper. Chu Yuanzi smiled and went out to eat. Behind him, Chu Jiao's face turned cold and he laughed sarcastically. He Zhihong is just a tiger with a smile on its face. She hides a knife in her honey and a sword in her belly. It is the woman who kills without blood. She doesn't know if she is pretending to be stupid or really stupid. But now she finally understands that a child who can cry gets candy. This is true. In the future, she will not only cry, but also make trouble. The good life is her own. Where's the fan in the house? He Zhihong raised her voice with dissatisfaction. It's too stuffy in the upturned house, she's ill. Chu Yuanzi said cautiously. What are we blowing in the afternoon? Why didn't you tell me about the fan? He Zhihong was even more dissatisfied. Chu Jiao didn't need a fan. He hadn't used it for so many years, and there was no need to use it now. Blow me up, I'll sleep in the living room. Chu Peng said suddenly, with a very impatient tone. As soon as he opened his mouth, He Zhihong didn't say a word. He glared at Chu Yuanzi, then served his son with vegetables, and asked about his studies with concern, but she asked 10 questions, but Chu Peng didn't answer a single one, and liked to ignore it. Chu Jiao was raised at home for 2 days, and her health improved. Naturally, the fan was taken away by He Zhihong, but she also learned to be good. She went to sleep in the living room at night. There was a ceiling fan in the living room, and she could sleep on the sofa. Besides, she didn't cook or do housework for the past 2 days. When He Zhihong asked, she said she had no energy and was disgusting, so she couldn't do it anyway. When He Zhihong and the others went to work, she made some food by herself, and she lived a happy life, but He Zhihong was not so happy. She had to go to work, cook and do housework again, and she was going crazy. But she couldn't scold Chu Jiao. She was the kindest and most generous stepmother, and the family members lived in all the colleagues. She had a good reputation for so many years, and she couldn't fall short. He Zhihong also understood a little. Chu Jiao was grieving about the heat stroke that day, so she took Jiao on purpose. In 2 days, she had to arrange for Chu Jiao and Gu Jianxi to meet and settle the marriage, so she could only appease the dead girl first. It's either biological or not well-bred, with a witty-eyed wolf, and it will be peaceful when you get married, and you can earn a betrothal gift, so it's not a loss. Thinking of this, He Zhihong felt more comfortable, and went to buy a new electric fan, Watson brand, more than 130 yuan. It cost her a month's salary, and she felt bad for her. The new fan was given to Chu Peng, and the old fan in Chu Peng's room was given to Chu Jiao. Chu Jiao's illness was healed, and he began to cook and do housework. Right now, she doesn't have the strength to fight, so she can only endure it first, but she also has a way to deal with it. Why is this tomato egg soup so salty? He Zhihong tasted the soup and looked unhappy. Last night, Chu Jiao's braised pork was so salty that she drank 3 glasses of water. Fat, this Chu Jiao is definitely intentional. Humph, it was only after 1 hit of the heat that this little started to act like a demon. Sure enough, he was a cheap thing in his bones, and he didn't urinate to see what he was. Chiao Chiao, what's the matter with you recently? We put so much salt in our cooking. Our family is not rich. Both your father and I are paid, but I can't bear you to spoil the dishes like this. He Zhihong said softly. Did not see any anger, and smiled slightly, but his eyes glanced at Chu Yuanzi. Chu Yuanzi was shocked, his face sank immediately, and he scolded angrily, Chiao Chiao, what are you doing? You can't do such a trivial thing well. Your aunt he works hard all day, and you can't even eat well. Chu Peng twitched the corner of his mouth and ate the water spinach, which was not salty, with chopsticks. Chu Jiao looked at the two couples innocently, took a spoonful of soup and drank it several times. His eyes became more innocent. It's not salty, I've tasted it, it's just right. She grabbed the chopsticks and chewed the water spinach again, chewed it a few times, and said in a panic, "Oh, I forgot to add salt to the water spinach. This hairtail is just right, not salty." Chu Jiao tasted all the dishes. She deliberately put 4 tablespoons of salt in the octopus and soup, while the water spinach and braised tofu were normal. Holding back her mouth full of gluttony, she ran to the kitchen to get a salt bowl, ready to add salt to the tofu and water spinach, and said, "Aunt He, the salt you bought this time is wrong, it's not salty at all." Chu Peng pulled a lot of tofu from the plate, added some water spinach, and continued to eat with his head down. His sister, her brain seems to be better after she has a fever. Maybe she is fighting fire with poison. Others have burned their brains stupidly, and this stupid woman has burned away the stupidity. He Jihong held down Chu Jiao's hand and added salt to the meal. "You said the salt is not salty." He Jihong looked at Chu Jiao suspiciously, thinking she was pretending. "Yes, it's not salty at all." Chu Jiao poured some salt into his mouth and smashed his face a few times like eating candy. He didn't change his face, he didn't raise his eyebrows. He Jihong and Chu Yuanzi looked at each other, and it didn't seem like they were pretending. Is the sense of taste really lost? Chu Yuanzi coughed a few times, and said slowly, "Fever can indeed lead to a loss of taste. Qiao Qiao burned so badly last time, maybe there is a problem with the sense of taste. When will it be better?" He Jihong asked anxiously. "It can be as short as a few days and a half months, or as long as a few years or even a lifetime. It's hard to say." Chu Yuanzi looked at his daughter sympathetically and sighed in his heart. His daughter's life is not good. She got a fever and burned her tongue, alas. "Dad, is there something wrong with my tongue? But I don't feel it. The dish is really light." Chu Jiao continued to pretend to be innocent, and even added salt to the dishes. He Jihong didn't see any of them, and there was a tablespoon of salt on the tofu, which made her temples hurt and her forehead throbbed. This day is not over. In the future, you can only put half a spoon of salt in cooking, remember. He Jihong pressed his temples and said with restraint. "Oh." Chu Jiao obediently agreed, but she had the final say on what to do. He Jihong couldn't swallow these deadly dishes at all, so He Jihong had to cheer up and cook some dishes again, sweating profusely and having no appetite at all. After they finished eating, Chu Jiao packed up the tableware and chopsticks. There was no one in the living room. She poured 3 cups of herbal tea and poured it down in one breath. She finally felt comfortable in her mouth. When she turned around, she saw Chu Peng standing in the back with a blank face, which startled her and squeezed out a smile. "Xiao Peng. Stupid." Chu Peng said a word coldly, and then went into the room to do his homework. Only his stupid elder sister could do such a stupid thing. But it's still a bit of progress. Before she burns her brain, this stupid woman can't even fight back. Kanshu www.uuganshu.com is pitiful and hateful, which makes people unable to sympathize. Chu Jiao blinked and didn't take it to heart. It was strange that her half-brother had a good face, and a dead face was the most normal. The next day, Chu Jiao made a more savory dish. The reason was that she forgot whether she had added salt, so she tasted it and it wasn't salty, so she added it, then tasted it, and added it. The reasons given by Chu Yuanzi are also very good. Fever may also lead to memory loss. This child is a big sin. Chu Yuanzi took pity on his daughter even more. Not only did his tongue burn, but his brain was also burnt, alas, sin. He Jihong didn't understand. Others were jumping around after a fever, but her stepdaughter was doing so much shit. She also lost her sense of taste and memory loss. If Chu Jiao was blind tomorrow, she wouldn't be surprised. This little is indeed a scumbag. Even a fever is cheaper than others. She hurries to marry before she is blind, out of sight and out of mind. It has been 6 days since he was reborn. Chu Jiao was very satisfied with her progress, so she won an electric fan, and even got rid of the task of 3 meals a day. She tried to think of a way to get rid of other housework as well. He Jihong cooked dinner again that day. She was sweating, and the heat made her have no appetite at all. Seeing Chu Jiao eating the food she worked so hard to cook with relish, He Jihong's forehead started to hurt again. Strongly swallowing his anger, He Jihong smiled gently and mentioned Gu Jianxi. Although Jian died of his wife, he is only 28 years old, and his 2 children are very sensible and obedient. As long as you are sincere to them, they will definitely treat you as a filial mother. Jian is now the deputy of the machine tool factory. Secretary, the old secretary still has 2 years to retire, and the successor will definitely be construction. The future is bright. You are married to the secretary's wife, how much happiness! Chu Jiao listened with her head down and sneered silently. He Jihong also said the same in her previous life. She praised Gu Jianxi so much. He was a good man unparalleled in the world. It was a blessing for her to marry such a good man. But He Jihong didn't say how Gu Jianxi's ex-wife died. When the ex-wife had a difficult childbirth, Gu Jianxi and his parents chose a small one. Just like what happened to her in her previous life, He Jihong was very clear about this, so she tried her best to prevent her own daughter from marrying her, but pushed her into the fire pit. Although He Jihong is vicious, her vision is really good, and she is extremely accurate in seeing people. The son-in-law she chose for her daughter, Gu Yat, is responsible and capable. If Su Billion hadn't committed suicide and divorced herself, her life would never be the same. Will be bad. However, Su Billion's life was not bad in her previous life. Although she was divorced, what family supported her and hooked up with Gu Jianxi? She was Mrs. Gu on the bright side. She was famous but had no power. The friends on the top all respect Su Billion, but they are dismissive of her, and they can't even look straight at her. In addition, Su Billion also opened a chain of restaurants in her previous life. The He Gu family were the backers, and the business was booming. She was considered a strong woman. Gu Jianxi often used Su Billion as an analogy to her, and asked her to learn from Su Billion, saying that she even no one's toes can compare. Bah! Thinking of the bad things in her previous life, Chu Jiao wanted to throw the bowl of seaweed egg soup in front of him on He Jihong's face, but she resisted it. To maintain a good reputation, people will only say that her junior is ignorant. Just tomorrow, it happens to be the weekend. You and Jianxi will meet each other and get to know each other. Let Jianxi come to eat at home. Zioku, you can buy more food tomorrow. He Jihong set the meeting time by talking to himself, and asked Chu Yuanzi to prepare the dishes. Chu Yuanzi bought the dishes at home. He Jihong could not let his stepdaughter take charge of the finances. She didn't even trust Chu Yuanzi. Give some living expenses, be very careful. Chu Yuanzi is 4 years younger than her, and He Jihong has always called him Xiao Chu, but she can dress well, looks good, and has a relaxed job, so there is no age difference, but compared to Chu Yuanzi's peerless beauty, He Jihong stands next to him, it's like a generation apart, and it doesn't match at all. Isn't it too urgent? Besides, Gu Jianxi has 2 children, and it's not good for him to be a stepmother after marrying. Chu Yuanzi protested in a low voice. He actually disapproved of this marriage. Feel good. He Jihong's face was stern, his eyes widened, and he shouted, "What's wrong with the stepmother? Didn't I marry you as a stepmother? Life is not as good as it is, it doesn't matter if it's not my own, just treat the child with sincerity, just like me for Qiao Qiao like this, change my sincerity, it's even more kissable than my own, I'm wholeheartedly planning for Qiao Qiao, if you, Chu Yuanzi, dislike me for not managing well, okay, I won't care about everything in the future." I didn't mean that. I say one sentence and you answer 100 sentences. Chu Yuanzi's voice became even lower, and finally it was barely audible and silent. He glanced at Chu Jiao, who lowered his head and said nothing, sighed silently, and comforted himself. Stepmother is just a stepmother. Anyway, Gu Jianxi has a good family background and a high salary. Her daughter will never endure material hardships when she is married. Chu Jiao sneered secretly, changing her sincerity. Hey! How can you say something like this? The stability and harmony of this family are all based on her hard work. In her previous life, she sacrificed most of her life for this family. He Chihonghe is in love with Chu Yuanzi and his wife. Su Bilian has a successful career. Chu Peng was admitted to a famous university, and he went abroad for further studies, with a bright future. Everyone praised He Chihong as having a good fortune, a son and a daughter, and she taught well. But no one thought of her as a stepdaughter. When she mentioned her, she just said casually, Chu Jiao. I haven't seen it for a long time, and I haven't said a few words. Chu Jiao gritted her teeth and thought of the pain and hatred in her previous life before her death. Listening to the doctor's tone, her daughter should not be able to keep it. It's better to go early to give birth. In the future, she will not have any more children, and she does not want to get married. It is good to live alone, but she has to think independently, and she has to move her household registration to Lukeng. He Chihong, an old slut, has never given her a household registration. His Huqiao is still in the countryside, under the name of Sun Yingxiu. Chu Jiao's thoughts moved, and suddenly thought of something, and he couldn't wait to move his Huqiao to Lukeng. He would think of a solution later on this matter, but for now, Gu Jianxi was resolved first. And he, let's meet outside. Come home when we meet for the first time. If we can't talk, others will gossip. Chu Jiao said. He Chihong is unwilling. In her opinion, there is nothing that cannot be discussed. Chu Jiao must marry Gu Jianxi, and the meeting is just a passing scene. What are you doing outside, just at home? Before He Chihong could finish speaking, Chu Peng suddenly said coldly, tomorrow Tang Weiguo will come to do his homework at home. I will call him and tell him not to come. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Weiguo is coming? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Mom will arrange it earlier. Xiao Chu, you should buy more prawns tomorrow morning. Weiguo likes to eat them. He Chihong's face was full of smiles. Tang Weiguo's family background was much higher than that of the He family. She wished Tang Weiguo would come to the house every day. Chiao, go outside and meet Jianxi tomorrow. There is a tea house nearby, so go there and meet up. I'll call Jianxi and let me know. He Chihong agreed to go out on a blind date. Chu Jiao, who can't be on the stage, shouldn't be embarrassed by staying at home. Anyway, the stepdaughter couldn't get out of her palm. Chu Jiao breathed a sigh of relief. He Chihong couldn't control her when she went outside. She could refuse Gu Jianxi, and she had to look ugly. It was better for Gu Jianxi to despise her for being ugly and look down on her. In the past life, she heard He Chihong's words, her bangs were tucked, revealing her whole face. Gu Jianxi looked straight. At that time she was still very happy, thinking that this man was stupid and looked strange, but now she realizes that 9 out of 10 men would be dumbfounded by this face. She is so beautiful, even if Su Bilian cuts her bones 100 times, she will not be able to make her so beautiful. After Chu Peng had eaten, he got up and went back to his room. He never liked to talk at home, and he was very cold. Chu Jiao looked suspiciously at the back of this half-brother, and always felt that Chu Peng was helping her just now. But how could it be? Chu Peng disliked her to death. He didn't talk to her when he was a child, and he always called her stupid. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Tang Weiguo and Chu Peng have a really good relationship. They went abroad to start a business together in a previous life. The brotherhood has always been very good. They are still classmates. Tang Weiguo often comes to home to do homework. It's a mess, both brothers are first in their class, one positive and one negative. Early the next morning, Chu Yuanzi went to the vegetable market to buy vegetables. According to He Zhihong's decree, he bought Tang Weiguo's favorite prawns. Chu Jiao put on an old-fashioned shirt and black pants, and his shoulder-length hair was loose. With bangs down, her eyes were covered, revealing half of her face pale and gloomy. Chu Jiao looked at Sadeko in the mirror with satisfaction. Gu Jianqi shouldn't look down on this ugly appearance, right? The Chu family's breakfast consisted of cookie-cutter-soaked rice with fermented bean curd, a few fried dough sticks, and a small plate of pickles. Chu Jiao ate a bowl of soaked rice and was ready to go out. "Auntie, I went to the tea house," Chu Jiao said. He Zhihong, who was busy in the kitchen, came out and saw her old-fashioned appearance. She couldn't help frowning, and went to get a clip for her to clip her bangs. No matter how old-fashioned she is, she can't hide the fact that she is a beauty. "Qingchuan Tea House, meet at 8:30, be careful when you speak." He Zhihong gave a few words of advice, and then let him go. Chu Jiao, the vixen's appearance, can be liked by any man. Gu Jianqi will definitely agree to this marriage, and it will save Billion thinking about Gu Jianqi all day long. Chu Jiao came out of the family building. In July, looking was very hot. The cicadas were constantly chirping, the heat wave was rolling, the floor was scorching hot, and the sandals were melting. She held up her umbrella and walked slowly towards Qingchuan Tea House, which was near the family building of the hospital. The family building was behind the hospital, and the outpatient building and inpatient department were in front. She had to pass through the outpatient building. A dark shadow rushed out in front of him, and then he was knocked down. Half of his shoulders hurt, and he fell to the ground. His was about to burn through. "I'm sorry, Auntie, I'll help you up." A clear male voice sounded. It sounded very familiar. It overlapped with a certain gunpowder-smelling voice in memory. Chu Jia raised his head, and it really was that man. But he was much younger, with a handsome face that was very anxious, carrying a little boy on his back and holding a 7 or 8-year-old boy in his hand. Seeing the true face of Auntie, Gu Ye was stunned for a moment. The contrast was too great. This dress is more old-fashioned than his mother, and he thinks it is more polite to call him Auntie. Facing this face that is more vicious than vixen, he wants to slap himself right now. He is so blind. "Right. I'm sorry, Aunt, girl. I didn't mean to. Why did you hurt?" It took a long while for Gu Ye to regain his senses. He didn't dare to look at Chu Jiao again. His eyes turned down, and he saw a pair of small white feet, with pink toes, so big that he could hold it with one hand. "Ying Ying has a grip. Slender feet." These two words suddenly popped into Gu Ye's mind. He gulped down his saliva. His throat was still very dry, and his forehead was sweating. Today's sun is so poisonous that he is about to suffer from heat stroke. Otherwise, why would there be hallucinations and see the peerless beauty as an aunt? Everyone, including the Gu family, thought that Gu Ye was not close to women, and even hated women, and even his own mother didn't look good, but no one knew that Gu Ye actually had 3 good things: slim waist, slender feet, baby voice in no particular order. He likes them all. The pair of slender feet in front of him really happened to grow on his heart everywhere, like a ray of light, hitting his heart that had been silent for 27 years. Resurrected. Dong dong, dong dong. His heart was beating faster and faster, and his palms were still itchy. Gu Ye used his strength to restrain his urge to grab the feet of other girls, and warned himself that he was a married woman and couldn't be a hooligan. "I can't hold it anymore. I'm about to pull it out." The little boy on his back suddenly screamed. Gu Ye then recovered, turned his head and shouted at the little boy, "Hold it for me, then pull up your pants and you will be bare buttocks, all your pants will be dirty." "I can't hold it anymore. I want to go to the toilet." The little boy wanted to cry but had no tears. He said that he asked Uncle Gu to tape the chrysanthemum. Can he control the diarrhea? Just bear with it. Guye was sweating profusely in anxiety. Taking the child was more tiring than fighting. Seeing that Chu Jiao was still sitting on the ground, he quickly stretched out his hand to help him. It was another light that struck his heart. Maybe this waist is not as thick as his arms, right? He can get stuck with one hand. So thin, so soft. Guye quickly retracted his hand like an electric shock. Jun's face turned purple-red, but he couldn't help but glance at Chu Jiao, and turned it aside again, his heart pounding. Dong dong, jump. Chu Jiao was a little angry at first, thinking that Guye took advantage of her, but he didn't expect this guy to be so frivolous when he was young. But seeing this guy's shy and awkward appearance, she couldn't help but want to laugh. This hot-impaired man was quite cute when he was young. Like a fool, she looked at the two boys again. He is the son of Guye's comrade in arms. He is very promising in the future, and he is also very filial to Guye. After Guye and Su Bilian divorced, they never remarried. They have no wife and no children. Wild himself knew. I'm fine, the child is important, let's go. Chu Jiao said with a slight smile. Guye's heart beat faster. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is over. This voice is so nice, like a baby doll. This woman is specially made for him by God, but why not let him hit him sooner? He is a married man now. Although he has nothing to do with Su Bilian, he can't mess around until he gets a divorce. Guye's intestines are about to regret it. He knew that he shouldn't have accepted his mother's arrangement and obtained the certificate with Su Bilian, but at that time he thought that he would never find the ideal woman in his life, and the two children needed a mother. The mother arranged the marriage and privately gave the dowry. Guye was angry, but he was helpless, so he simply agreed. But even if he didn't meet Chu Jiao today, Guye was going to divorce Su Bilian. This is not a thing, it's fine to steal someone, and abuse the child. He can't bear this and must leave. My name is Guye. This is my phone number. If you fall anywhere, just call me and I will pay for the medical bills. Guye took out a notepad from his pocket, wrote down his name and phone number in a frantic manner, stuffed it in Chu Jiao's palm, took a deep look at her, and carried the little boy who was about to cry with all his strength on his back, flying towards him. Outpatient building run. I can't hold back. I pulled it out. Didn't I tell you to endure it? You can get your bear. Guye scolded angrily. Who told you to just talk to the pretty sister, and don't care about me, woo? I don't want to go berries. Pretty auntie, no big or small, what the fuck? I've been smoked to death, Josiobeo, why are you so bad? Who doesn't urinate? Uncle Gu, yours stinks even more. The three of them ran and screamed. It was more chaotic than fleeing the desert. Chu Jiao was about to burst into tears from laughter. Chu Jiao stood there for a while, and the three men had already entered the outpatient building. It seemed that the little boy had diarrhea, which was quite serious. These two boys were brothers, and their father was Guye's comrade in arms. Chu Jiao is not clear about the situation, she guessed that it should be sick and gone. Otherwise, which mother would give up her own son and take care of herself to be dashing and happy? The names of the brothers, Chu Jiao, are also unclear. The nicknames are easy to remember. The younger is Zhou Xiaobao and the older is Zhou Dabao. The new rich man in the city, Zhou Xiaobao, is very beautiful, he is very talented in singing and dancing, he has become a popular actor, and his traffic strength is top-notch. In the past life, Chu Jiao especially liked to watch the movies starring Zhou Xiaobao. By the way, Zhou Xiaobao's stage name is Gunyo. Chu Jiao remembers it very clearly. After all, she is also a fan of this child's mother. Well, looking at it, I feel pity and love, and it hurts to want to be a son. The brothers are also very filial to their adoptive father, Guye. No matter how busy they are, they will find time to go home to accompany Gu Ye and find a wife for Gu Ye, but they were all rejected by Gu Ye. The Gu family privately said that Gu Ye still misses his ex-wife Su Billion. Su Billion also thinks so, and she is very proud. Chu Jiao didn't know if it was because of this. Anyway, when she died in her previous life, Gu Ye was still a bachelor, and there was no scandal. He was the fifth Diamond King in Lekang. There seemed to be a fiery and irritable voice in his ears, and the corners of Chu Jiao's lips rose. Now Gu Ye is in a state of embarrassment. How can he have the half-slender style of later generations, and his temper seems to be more irritable, but this man is as responsible as ever, just for one person. Promise, and work hard to raise 2 children who are not related by blood. He is a big man, and raising 2 children is not an easy task, especially the Zhou Dabao brothers are not in good health. They were frail and sick when they were young. Going to the hospital is in charge. When they grow up, their bodies are not too strong. Otherwise, brothers neither will give up their military service. She heard from the Gu family that Gu Ye wanted the brothers to join the army, and the brothers had the same idea, but the physical examination failed. Zhou Dabao had a cough, and Zhou Xiaobao had a bad stomach. Medicine conditioning, so the brothers that Chu Jiao met in the previous life were both very thin. Compared with Gu Jianshi's 2 sons, these 2 brothers were much thinner. Thinking of the 2 witty-eyed wolves she raised so hard, Chu Jiao sneered. The eldest and Zhou Dabao were the same year, and they were also 8 years old. The youngest was only 8 months old and could not walk. At Grandma's place, they were raised like thin monkeys. After she took over, she took care of them carefully. She had 3 meals a day to ensure that they were full of color, flavor, and nutrition. In less than half a year, the 3 of them had grown a lot of meat. Especially the 2 witty-eyed wolves, the skinny monkeys turned into calves, and the fights were fierce. She was heartbroken because of this, for fear that they would go the wrong way. Gu Jianxi never cared about the 2 sons. He said that the male lead and the female lead inside, she had 100% trust in her, and she felt very relieved after hearing it, feeling that she had married a good man. At that time, she was so stupid, she willingly served as a nanny for the 3 masters of Gu Jianxi, thankfully for 20 years, and died at the hands of the 3 masters without anything. Chu Jiao sneered again. She no longer thought about the bad things in her previous life. In this life, she will definitely be a new person. Today's blind date must be destroyed. There was a clothing store on the side of the road, and the glass windows showed very clearly. Chu Jiao took off the clip, and the thick bangs drooped down, covering the upper half of his face. Indeed worthy of a big ant. Chu Jiao couldn't help laughing, that Hanan actually called her auntie. She should have responded at that time, she was a big nephew. Very satisfied with her image, Chu Jiao bared her lips again, revealing her white teeth. Her teeth were fairly neat, but she had 2 tiger teeth. Chu Jiao didn't know that later generations described her as pure and lustful, and loved by otaku, straight, and showy men. But now her image of Sadako looks even more gloomy with a grin. Chu Jiao has practiced several times in front of the window, the corners of her mouth are raised, and a few teeth are exposed. As soon as the building saw it, he wanted to quit and took the initiative to quit the marriage. There was a wall clock in the clothing store. It was 8:40. Chu Jiao smiled. Gu Jianxi had a strong sense of time and hated others to be late, so she would be late. Qingchuan Tea House is not far from the hospital, and it takes 5 minutes to walk there. Gu Jianxi has been sitting for 10 minutes. He arrived at the tea house on time at 8:30, no sooner or later, but he had already had a pot of tea, and his blind date had not arrived yet. Gu Jianxi frowned, and he had an opinion in his heart. His dignified deputy secretary arrived on time, but a stepdaughter who was dragging oil bottle was still 10 minutes late. She had no sense of time at all. If this Chu Jiao looks too ordinary, he will definitely not agree to this marriage. Although he is married for the 2nd time, He has 2 sons, and he is not too young, but he is the deputy secretary of the machine tool factory and has a bright future. Grandpa is still a veteran coder, and Yuyuganshu www.yuyuganshu.com has a family background that ranks first in looking, and a girl with average conditions is definitely not worthy of him, nor can he bring it out. Gu Jianqi thought of Su Billion. During this period of time, he had a hot fight with him, and he couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Unfortunately, it was a pity that when his ex-wife died, the accident happened after Su Billion got married. Otherwise, he would not need a blind date now. Although Su Billion's appearance is not particularly beautiful, she is decent, and her family background is not bad. She is barely worthy of him. Thinking of Su Billion's enthusiasm in bed last night, Gu Jianqi is even more proud. In fact, it's good to maintain it as it is now. Every time he is with Su Billion, he thinks of Gu Yi's head, and the green light on it is all lit by him. Humph, Gu Yi couldn't compete with him since he was a child, and even worse when he grew up. Now that his wife has let him sleep, Gu Yi's idiot is still in the dark. Gu Jianqi was in a much better mood. He raised his wrist to check the time. It was already 8:50. 20 minutes had passed since the appointed time. This Chujiao shelf is quite big. It's just a fuel oil bottle, and I don't have any self-knowledge. Gu Jianqi sneered and decided to wait another 5 minutes. If Chujiao didn't arrive, the marriage would be nothing. Gu Jianqi was handsome and had a bright future. What kind of partner could he not find? Chujiao actually arrived early. She stood outside the restaurant for a while, and then entered slowly. Sure enough, she saw Gu Jianqi who was sitting in the lobby with an impatient face, so she walked even more slowly. She was 10 meters away. After walking for 5 minutes, it was only then that a snail walked up to Gu Jianqi. "Hello, I'm Chu Jiao." Chu Jiao deliberately lowered her voice, and it sounded hoarse and dull, different from the usual sweet baby voice. Gu Jianqi raised his head, stunned, and made no secret of his surprise. This woman dressed like an old woman is Chu Jiao, who he Jihong praised as a fairy? It's almost like a ghost, it can scare people to death in broad daylight. Gu Jianqi's complexion quickly recovered. His superficial skills have always been in place. Even if he is dissatisfied, he will not show it. "Hello, I'm Gu Jianqi." Gu Jianqi stood up, smiled at Chu Jiao, and put the looking daily on the table aside. Chu Jiao sat down and grinned at him. The exposed white teeth made Gu Jianqi feel cold. Originally, he thought the fan in the restaurant was not cool enough, but now he felt that the wind was too cool. This Chu Jiao looks too rash, no wonder she still can't marry after she is 21. "What kind of tea do you want to drink?" I ordered Longjing. I have finished drinking a pot, and I have gone to the toilet twice. Gu Jianqi also sat down and euphemistically indicated that he had waited for a long time, wanting to see how the woman would explain her lateness. But Chu Jiao just pretended not to hear it, took the list on the table, only looked at the most expensive one, and waved to the waiter, who came over immediately. "Lai hu de hong bao, I want some snacks." "Comrade Gu Jianqi, what snacks would you like to eat?" Chu Jiao looked at Gu Jianqi, who was on the opposite side, and grinned, making Gu Jianqi feel trembling with laughter, and he had a bigger opinion of her. The first time they met, they ordered de hong bao and refreshments. This woman is too uneducated. But the dignity of a man made him unable to say anything to refuse, but his smile forced a lot. "I just had breakfast, I'm not hungry, so I don't eat snacks." The implication is that I want to remind Chu Jiao that it is only before 9 o'clock, and I have just eaten breakfast. "What snacks?" "I didn't eat much for breakfast, I was hungry." Chu Jiao bared his teeth again, and smiled at the waiter. "Here's a bach hen cake, a lungiao cake, a rose crisp candy, and a spiced dried bean curd. Let's do it first, I'll order it if it's not enough." "You two wait a moment." The smile on the waiter's face was much more attentive, and she liked generous and cheerful customers. The smile on Gu Jianshi's face has faded a lot. Every time Chu Jiao is the same, he silently calculates the price in his heart, and his heart sinks little by little. Although he is now the deputy secretary, his salary is still acceptable, even with bonuses. Total attendance is about 200 yuan, but he pays his parents 80 yuan a month for living expenses. The two sons live with their parents and they need money for food, drink, and Lazarus. For the remaining 120, he will save 50 a month, and he only spends 70, including personal exchanges, clothes, and shoes. 2 yuan for a pot of the cheapest longjing, and 10 yuan for edamame and peanuts. This Chu Jiao is very good. A mouth is the most expensive Dahongbao, a pot of Dahongbao costs 12 yuan, and the other dim sums are not cheap. How could this woman say that they are not enough? Where did her face come from? Will there be too much to eat? Gu Jianshi gritted his teeth and squeezed out a smile, hoping that the woman could understand what he meant. No, it's only a few dollars. Chu Jiao glanced at him, feeling better, and asked, "Did I order too much? Do you have enough money?" Gu Jianshi squeezed the wallet in his trousers pocket. It was only 50 yuan. Today is only the middle of the month. At the end of the month, there are colleagues in the factory who are getting married, and there are children in the compound who have been reduced to a full moon. They are asking for money everywhere. He was about to say that the money might not be enough. Anyway, he didn't like this woman, so he didn't need to spend too much money, when a familiar sneer came from his ears. "Remember, Dabao, you must bring enough money for a blind date in the future, otherwise you will face they've all been thrown into my grandma's house." Chu Jiao heard it too, raised her head in surprise, and saw Gu Ye and the two children, sitting on the table next to her at some point, researching with a list in her hand, and hadn't ordered anything yet. "You must bring enough money for a blind date, and you can't lose face." "I remember it." Zhou Dabao repeated it very seriously, his voice was still loud, the smile on Gu Jianshi's face condensed, he glared at Gu Ye angrily, opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say a word, too lazy to care about this stuff. He smiled softly at Chu Jiao and said, "Since I didn't have breakfast, I'll order more." "Don't worry, I'll have enough money." He deliberately said the last sentence loudly, and even glanced to the side. Chu Jiao laughed secretly. This Gu Ye came at the right time. He was Gu Jianshi's mortal enemy. For the sake of a man's face, even if Gu Jianshi beat his face to a pulp, it must not be said that she ordered too much. "Then I'm welcome. I was worried that you didn't have enough money." Chu Jiao was not polite at all, and waved to the waiter again. "I'll have another yam cake and red date cake." "Well, I'll also have a U-turn cake and a double brewed ball." "Let's do this for now, if there's not enough for a while, I'll order it again." "Okay, I'll have it right away." The waiter turned to Gu Yi's table again and smiled. Gu Jianshi snorted softly. He wanted to see what this product ordered. Gu Ye studied it for a long time and found that the things in this place are quite expensive. The cheapest thing is a pot of hot tea for 2 yuan. He wanted to stand up for Gu Jianshi, but the money in his pocket was not strong. The two children went to the hospital 3 times this month. Yuuganshu.com still has more than half a month before the salary is paid, so I have to save some money. "Come to a pot of longjing." Gu Ye grinned at the waiter girl. He was handsome and handsome. Although he ordered the cheapest tea, the waiter girl had a good impression of him and smiled shyly. The last longjing was replaced by a medium one. Gu Jianshi snorted again, his eyes were disdainful, and 3 of them were poor. Su Billion told him that Gu Yi's salary was not enough to go to the hospital. Humph, since childhood, he was stupid, and he raised other people's sons like treasures. What's not stupid? Gu Ye didn't take it seriously, poured 2 cups of hot tea for the brothers, poured a cup himself, and drank it slowly, but couldn't help glancing at Chu Jiao from the corner of his eyes. Seeing her bangs down, she looked like a rustic ant, but secretly rejoiced in his heart. This girl was tailor-made for him by God. Gu Jianxi didn't even think about it, and he guessed that Chu Jiao wanted to let go of his bangs, so he probably didn't want to, right? This guess made him even more happier. The bitter tea made him drink the sweet taste, the corners of his mouth rose slightly, and his eyes were full of smiles. When he went back, he would divorce Su Billion's girls, and he wanted to pursue his daughter-in-law innocently. Zhou Dabao took a sip of tea, his mouth was shriveled, it was bitter to death, and it was not good at all. Zhou Xiaobao was lying on the table, not daring to show his face, because he was naked, and the old man below, Gu Shihao, he ripped off his pants mercilessly and refused to go home, so he insisted on coming here for tea. When she saw the pretty sister, she was stupid. She didn't even count how much money she had in her pocket. Zhou Xiaobao snorted softly, looked at the sumptuous desserts on the table next to her, and her stomach growled. I finished eating all last night, and now my stomach is empty. Zhou Xiaobao swallowed and moved his eyes with all his strength, not to embarrass Uncle Gu, that Gu Jianxi is not a good thing. Chu Jiao felt the eyes of the two brothers. Children like to eat snacks, but now Gu Ye was at his worst. He was assigned to a machine tool factory after changing jobs and was assigned to a unit with Gu Jianxi, but Gu Jianxi was the deputy secretary and took the salary of cadres, but Gu Ye is only the chief of the security section, his rank is lower than that of Gu Jianxi, and the salary is naturally less. In addition, the two children often go to the hospital, and they are stretched every month, and Gu Ye has spent a lot of money since he was a child. A pot of tea. All the desserts she ordered were delivered, and there was a full table. She only took a piece of yam cake to eat, and ate the rest. In her previous life, although she had accomplished nothing, she was not a full-time mother for nothing. She had good cooking skills, and had all kinds of Chinese and Western snacks at her fingertips. Gu Jianxi often gave her snacks as gifts to save money and save face. Moreover, she also made a good medicated meal, which is a recipe handed down from the Chu family. The Chu family is a family of traditional Chinese medicine and has handed down a lot of recipes, but Chu Yuanzi is a shy son and has a low status, and only one copy was passed down to him. Chu Yuanzi didn't look down on the recipe for medicinal food, and He Zhihong didn't look down on it at all. In his previous life, it was in Chu Jiao's hands. When she has nothing to do, she studies this recipe. There are a total of 100 herbal meals. She has thoroughly studied all of them, and she has also innovated a lot. She often cooks 3 for Gu Jianxi to eat, and makes these 3 beasts fat and white. Why don't you eat dim sum? Gu Jianxi's voice interrupted Chu Jiao's memory. She glanced at the dim sum with disgust, and said unhappily, it doesn't taste right, I can't eat it. In one breath, Gu Jianxi wanted to scold people, but he ordered so much that it was not delicious. It wasn't the woman's money that was wasted in co-authoring. Gu Jianxi took a piece of rose crispy candy to eat. It was so sweet that he was tired of eating a piece. He could only look at this table of banknotes and felt distressed. He didn't like sweets. After taking a sip of tea, Gu Jianxi brought up the business, and he told you about my situation, right? My name is Gu Jianxi, 28 years old, Deputy Secretary of Xingda Machine Tool Factory, and has 2 sons, the eldest is 8 years old. Little 8 months. Your youngest son is only 8 months old? What the hell? Did he die or left? Chu Jiao interrupted Gu Jianxi, who was talking endlessly. Gu Jianxi was choked up, gritted his teeth and said, I passed away in childbirth 8 months ago, Comrade Chu Jiao, this is my situation, because I am busy with work, and I can't take care of my family and my 2 children. You mean to find a woman to take care of your 2 sons? Then why don't you find a nanny? Chu Jiao interrupted again, and without looking at the man's black face, Gu Zhi said, your wife just died, so you have to give birth to a child to die for you. No matter what, you have to keep your filial piety for 3 years? It's only 8 months. When looking for a partner, have you considered your child's feelings? Comrade Gu Jianxi, you are so cruel to your child. What she said is also the actual situation. In her previous life, after she married Gu Jianxi, the younger one didn't understand anything, so it was okay to deal with it, but the older one regarded her as an enemy and tried to oppose her all day long, and Gu Jianxi didn't care about the family. But if his son complained to him, he would definitely help his son, scolding her for not fulfilling her responsibilities. In her previous life, she had to endure for 3 years before she allowed her 2 children to accept her with respect, but she only called her Auntie Chu. She thought that after 20 years of hard work, she would always be able to move these brothers. Humph, it turns out that the beast her son is still a beast, she is just moved by herself. Chu Jiao's voice was quite loud, and all the guests in the restaurant turned their heads and looked here, looking at Gu Jianxi with disdain in their eyes. The wife had a blind date only 8 months after her child was born and died. This man really has no conscience. Gu Jianxi felt the strange eyes from the guests, his face was hot, and he couldn't help but turn into anger, but he suppressed his anger and explained softly, I understand what you said, but I'm too busy with work to take care of the children. The ex-wife certainly doesn't want the child to suffer. I understand what you mean, I just want to find a mother for the 2 children to take care of them, right? Chu Jiao asked loudly, attracting another wave of guests' glances. Gu Jianxi gritted his teeth, really wanted to scold people, and wanted to leave, but he couldn't save face, so he had to say, I can't say the same, not only take care of the children, but also my wife, and I stand together through thick and thin to make progress together. Not only do you have to take care of the 2 children, but also you? Comrade Gu Jianxi, I suggest you find a nanny. It's really hard to be your wife. Chu Jiao interrupted the man's nonsense again. Gu Jianxi's face was as black as charcoal, and he didn't get angry under the pressure. Chu Jiao was not afraid of him, and continued, tell me about my situation, my name is Chu Jiao. 21 years old, unemployed, has a quick temper, especially hates children, and will beat people when he gets angry. Next to him, Zhou Xiaobao shivered and took a sip of hot tea. Pretty sister is so fierce. I still hate cooking. I'm tired of being greasy and greasy. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. By the way, I had a high fever a few days ago and lost my sense of taste. Also, my heart is not very good, I can't get angry, I can't work, I can't have children. If you think it's okay, let's go everywhere. Chu Jiao said a lot. Gu Jianxi's face was already quite ugly. He only regretted why he came for this date today. This woman looks like a ghost. She has no job and no looks, and has heart disease. Choi Si, has a bad temper, is this marrying an ancestor? What he was looking for was a gentle, virtuous, obedient, and well-behaved woman, not the Empress Dowager. Comrade Chu Jiao, I have something to do at home, so I'll go back first. Gu Jianxi didn't have the patience to sit down any longer. He wanted to ask the waiter to come over to pack snacks. He spent 32 yuan. He wanted to take it back to his son to eat. Then go back quickly. I will eat these snacks slowly, so I can't waste them. I'm fine anyway. Chu Jiao said with a smile. Gu Jianxi stretched out his hand in the air, and suddenly froze. He couldn't stretch it any longer, but he still said, you can eat so much by yourself. A large table of desserts, this woman can't eat even a pig, right? I can't finish the food I brought to the stray dogs on the roadside. When I came here just now, I saw several stray dogs. They were so skinny and hungry. It's really pitiful. Chu Jiao's tone of sympathy made Gu Jianxi speechless. He is very face-saving, and he can't do anything to compete with women for food in public, even though he is very distressed. $32. Gritting his teeth, Gu Jianxi turned around and walked away, his face ashen, and hurriedly left the tea house. He wanted to go back and call He Jihong, so don't arrange for such a stupid woman in the future. He Gujian Shi Tang Tang's deputy secretary, it's not that he can't get a wife.